Just realized I have crazy hair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie. I am the owner and founder of Lady Faltey's Apothecary. We are here this morning to talk about Mabon. Also, most of you would know it as just the autumn equinox. So, where the name Mabon came from, we're going to talk about what today is all about. I'm going to go over a few little myths that go along, if you want to call them myths. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to talk just a little bit about some things that you can do today and during this time to honor Mabon or autumn equinox, whatever you prefer to call it. So before we do that, I'm going to smudge just a little bit. And I have a leaf in here that didn't burn down all the way, so I'm going to just go ahead and use that. So some for you guys. Morning, Kimberly. Some for me. All right, so we're going to get right into it because I got a lot to go over. And my goal is to keep it within an hour, but I'm doubting that's going to happen. But I'm going to try not to squirrel too much. I'm going to try not to get off topic and wander too much. So yeah, so autumn equinox. Most of you are pretty familiar if you're in the northern hemisphere. If you're in the southern, it's going to be one of those days. Southern hemisphere, they're actually going into their spring equinox, so they're opposite of us. But for those of you who are in the northern, we're going to talk about the autumn equinox today. So. Still working on my coffee this morning. All right, so where to start here? So on the wheel of the year, and I actually got a little paper out here for you guys. So, of course, it's going to be backwards for you, but this is the wheel of the year. So you can see all of the 8 high holidays. So out of the 8 high holidays, there are what they call 4 Sabbats. And there are 4, so Yule, which would be winter solstice, and then Beltane, no, sorry, said that wrong. Where am I? Anyway, winter solstice and summer solstice are the greater. Oh, I don't need to keep holding that. You can Google Wheel of the Year. You'll get 5 bazillion different images. So just, if you want to work with one, pick one that resonates with you. Sorry, already trying not to get off traffic. 8 high holidays, Sabbats. There's 4 Sabbats. And 2 of them are the greater Sabbats, which is your summer solstice and your winter solstice. And then your lesser Sabbats are your fall equinox and your spring equinox. So we are right now having a lesser equinox Sabbat. Okay. Mabon is also the, and if you didn't figure that out, sorry, I didn't say it, but summer and winter solstices are opposite each other on the calendar year, and your spring and your fall equinoxes are opposite of the calendar, right? So it's about that balance. So, all right. So the other thing Mabon is it's also known as the second harvest. The first harvest is what most people would call Lunasaw. And that would be a time where it can also be called Lammas. And probably around the world, it probably has way more names than I know. But for our purpose today, that's we're going to call it Lunasaw. So Lammas kind of came in more towards the Christianity part of but anyway. Um, Lunasa is the first harvest, and it's just what it says it is. It's the first harvest. It's the first time in the summer where you're really going out and if you've got a garden, and which they would have been very heavily relying on their garden and their crops to survive the winter, right? So Lunasa would be the first harvest, and then Mabon is the second harvest, and then Samhain will be the third harvest. And Samhain is what we now, most of us know. During that time, I will come and do a video for you about that as well. So, if you've seen some of my other videos that I've posted over the last couple of weeks about Mabon, I'm probably not going to tell you anything too much new. I have some other things that I'm going to add in that I haven't added in before. But Mabon is not a new holiday. It's been around for thousands of years. And so I'm not going to tell you something new that just popped up, right? Really. But anyway, so this is the middle harvest. So with that, let's see. What exactly is this holiday about? Well, we know right now that I just told you it's about the harvest, right? During these three harvests, it was a big deal. There would have been a lot of praying to the gods. There would have been a lot of offerings, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit later too as well, to the gods. There would have been a lot of gratitude towards the gods and goddesses. When I say gods, I mean gods and goddesses. So if I don't say and goddesses every time, just know that's all incorporated for me. So what else? Yeah, so it would have been a big time of being thankful. This has later become also known as the Witches' Thanksgiving. That's another name that you might hear around today or see on social media. It may be called Witches' Thanksgiving. Now, to me, it makes sense that this time would be Thanksgiving because for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, like I'm really Northern, during the end of November, there's no harvesting. Like it's probably covered in snow. There's no going out and getting my winter squash, you know? um, so for me, this time of year where we're really harvesting and we're getting all of our plants in and our vegetables in, it just kind of makes more sense to me that this would be the time that you would be having that type of feast of, they would be getting their livestock ready for winter. So preparing the ones that were going to be butchered, slaughtered, and then they would be getting their vegetables in, and they were doing any kind of preserving they could, and all of that stuff. So to me, I don't necessarily classify myself as a witch, but I don't not classify myself as a witch either. There's a lot of the ways and the traditions that I believe in, and but I'm a little bit anyway, longer, more difficult story. So you may also hear it called Witches' Thanksgiving. So the name Mabon wasn't what it was known as. Mabon, when somebody came up with that Wheel of the Year I showed you, because back thousands of years ago, they didn't have a calendar. They didn't go mark off Monday, Tuesday, oh, it's Christmas, or oh, it's, Mabon. They followed the sun and the moon, where the placements were, and that's how they knew when to plant their crops, harvest their crops, things like that. So during the equinox, I'm skipping here a little bit, but it's a time of night and day is the same length, right? Because we're seeing now that the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer. So today is the day where the daylight and night are the same. So there's your balance in there of dark and light. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more as well. So let's see here. What have I missed here? So Mabon, back to the name of Mabon. Sorry, again, I'm trying not to squirrel here. So Mabon, like I said, was not the original name. It was just the harvest. The Druids had, of course, it was in not English. So, and I'm not even going to pretend to try to pronounce their name, but it translates to middle harvest. So again, I said it was the second harvest. So it's the middle harvest out of the three. So that's basically what they called it. The name Mabon was given to it when somebody made up that wheel. And that was done around the 70s. So it's fairly new, right? I mean, we're talking, 50, 60 years ago, but in the scope of it, that's really new, the name Mabon, okay? So and that Wheel of the Year was made. And because, like I said, a lot of this stuff wasn't written down. The pins and the people of that time didn't they didn't have a journal, they didn't have a day planner. It just, things weren't written down. Things were carried down by word, by storytelling and teaching, by word of mouth to the children, and then who talked to their children, and so on and so forth. So um, anyway, now we're in the age of everybody wants things written down and pretty pictures and all that sort of nonsense. So anyway, the Wheel of the Year was made. It wasn't made up. So those holidays have been around forever. The Wheel of the Year imagery of it and things were just is more of a more modern thing, but they didn't make up the holidays. Those have been around for forever. Um, so, um, so yeah, so that was Mabon was made up. The word Mabon comes from, and I may have covered this in some of my other videos. So again, if I'm repeating some of it that you've watched before, I apologize. I am going to try to cover some new stuff here as well. So Mabon came from the name is a name of a Welsh deity. So he was the son of Madron, and I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's Modron, because they don't pronounce things anything like what you think they would pronounce them like. So, son of Madron. So Mabon was a son of a deity. So he was a deity. And there's a story that goes along with him spending time in the underworld and returning and all of that. But he was given the name Mabon was given in honor to him. Now, there's controversy around that because he really didn't have a whole lot to do with the harvest itself. He was not a deity that would have probably been really worshipped during those times. But anyway, that's the name it was given, and that's the name that kind of has stuck. But yeah, if you ask somebody, especially somebody from Ireland, they're not going to call it Mabon. So they are probably just going to call it the second harvest or the middle harvest or fall equinox, or they may call it the Druid name, but again, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. So, and I'm sure all of this is going to translate over to, there was a Gaelic word for it. Again, things like that. But anywho, as far as the festivals itself, They would have been great festivals. They would have been, even though it was a lesser Sabbath, it still would have been a big festival. People would have traveled long distances to gather to do these festivals. What we kind of see now as like the fair, right? In the fall time, we have the fair where everybody goes and there's rides and games and eating and, celebrating at the fair. So it would have been not exactly like that, but under that same kind of concept that people would have all come together, and it would have been a big thing. There would have been games. They wouldn't have looked like our games now, but there would have been games, and there would have been different things, activities to do, and like I said, lots of eating and drinking and dancing, singing, storytelling, bonfires. All of that. And like I said, people would have traveled for a very long distance. People would have also, just a little bit here, quick, again, I'm trying not to side note too much because you can go way off on all these different things, but people would have traveled these long distances. They would have actually brought their animals with them and then slaughtered them once they got there. So, because they didn't have coolers, right? So not only traveling this very long distance with family and their harvest of vegetables and their livestock, and they would have been going these long distances, which would have, I don't even know, maybe taken them weeks. I have no idea. Some of them, who knows? I'm told you before, geographically, I'm not good. Don't ask me directions. I can't get you there. And so I have no idea how long it would take somebody in a cart to get from one place to another place. I can only imagine it was horrible. But they did it. All right. So again, that would have been a time of really being thankful and showing gratitude. So showing gratitude to the gods and goddesses for the harvest that they have already received. And then they would have been making offerings for that, but also for the third harvest so that they continue to get lots and lots of product from that, because again, their survival depended on it. They couldn't go to Shaw's or Walmart and get groceries, and they couldn't order on Amazon to get their groceries delivered to them. So they really needed that food to survive. So there would have been a lot of gratitude and offering and honoring the gods and the goddesses. So let me just check my notes here. The last thing I do want to mention before we kind of switch over into talking, the next thing I'm going to talk about is some of the gods and goddesses that I want to share with you. But before we do that, real quick, I just want to mention that again, back then, during this time, harvesting aside and festivals aside and things like that, this would have been a time where they, again, would have just been preparing for winter, right? So for them, they would have probably still been pretty busy. They would have been getting the harvest in. They would have been preparing their animals for slaughter. They would have been preparing what they were going to do with the animal after it was slaughtered, blah, blah, blah. So they were probably still pretty busy. But it was all in preparation to move inward, to move indoors, right? So they've had their summer of harvesting and livestock and hard work, and then we're going to start moving into our winter time of the year. So we have our summer solstice part of it, right? But it really starts at spring when we start planting. So even though summer solstice and winter solstice are the greater of the Sabbats, I think as far as livelihood goes, I think the spring equinox and the fall equinox are were pretty important. I would think that that would be pretty important, right? Spring is when we know we're going to go plant, and then fall is when we know we've got to get everything ready to to prepare for winter. So they would have been preparing to go inward, and have a more quiet life and a more quiet time. And they would have, again, and I'll talk about some more of this at Samhain, Halloween, but they would have been spending a lot of time around the fireplace inside. There would have been a lot of storytelling, singing, things like that around the fire. And so it would have been a family time. And same, I think, with us here. Our summer where I'm located is really, really short. Like we really only have like 3 months of summer, but we do all the things that we can in the summer, and then in the winter we definitely go more inward. We don't go out as much. We don't have as much to do, and it's a little bit more. We spend time with family. So you can see where that cycle has still kind of continued over, not as much, as far as, like we don't have to stay inside, because if we go outside, we'll freeze because we have cars with heat and things like that and stuff. But we still do tend to go inward a little bit more during winter, and our life kind of quiets down, unless, except for around the holidays, a lot of us are busy. But you get my point, right? So we're kind of still seeing that pattern. So where I'm going with this should be a time for us, to as well be thankful for what we have, and be thankful for what is to come. And we should be spending some of this time preparing for our winter, like whether we don't have to be shut up in a cabin, us huddled around the fireplace, but we can take this time and rest and reflect and recuperate for the next year, which is what they would have been doing, right? They would have been resting and recuperating and planning and everything for as soon as spring came to start again. So, we can kind of take that in our more modern world and kind of, make that fit and reflect for us a little bit. You're probably going to hear a lot, if you watch a lot of these different videos on YouTube, if you watch anybody that's talking about Mabon, Samhain, all of those things. You're going to hear a lot about shadow work. So again, shadow work is really just doing internal work. It's facing the parts of ourselves that we consider the darker parts of ourselves. So we're moving out of the light into the dark. So from the spring equinox of light into the fall equinox of dark. So a lot of people will talk about shadow work and working on the darker sides of your life. If you guys have watched my weekly astrology videos, a lot of times when I'm talking about like a specific sign, zodiac sign, I will tell you the good energies, but I'll also say like, well, beware because this might happen or you might be feeling this or whatever. All of us have that side. All of us have the lighter and the darker. And shadow work, again, I'm not going to go into all of it because it could be a whole video on its own. But I don't necessarily, in my opinion, shadow work is not something just to do in the fall. Shadow work is something that we should constantly work on all year long. We should constantly be trying to improve ourselves. We should constantly be understanding ourselves, why we are the way we are, how we're made up. If you've watched my videos, you've most likely heard me say, get your natal chart done. It's going to be super, super helpful for you in understanding things. But, so just you're going to probably, like I said, you're probably going to hear a lot around this time of people talking about shadow work. And really, like I said, that's just being some of that turning inward and doing that work. But again, I'm a big believer that that stuff should be done all year long. Like, we shouldn't just say, like, in the fall, I'm going to try to improve myself. Like, I think that stuff needs to be done all year long. So enough about that. If you guys have got questions, just put them in the comments. I will be more than happy to answer them. I might, during Samhain, maybe delve into shadow work a little bit more for you if that's something you're interested in. So let me know. But today I really wanted to talk about some of the gods and goddesses of this time. And then we're going to switch over and usually I'll tell you some things that you can work with and things that you can do for this holiday. So, yeah. So some of the gods and goddesses that you may want to work with during this particular holiday, whether you want to call it middle harvest, whether you want to call it second harvest, whether you want to call it autumn equinox, whether you want to call it Mabon, which is Thanksgiving, whatever you want to call it. They're all fine. And again, probably around the world, there are so many more names for this holiday that I have never even heard of before. So you call it what you feel like you want to call it. Whatever resonates best with you. But so with that, the first thing that I want to talk about is some of the goddesses that would have been honored at this time. There's stories that go along with all of these, and I unfortunately can't tell you all the whole stories of all of these because, again, this video would be a whole day long. So I'm thinking that maybe starting sometime in January, I don't know. I'm going to try to do some shorter videos, like 15, 20 minutes, maybe on some stories of some goddesses and gods and goddesses for you guys. But anyway, for today's purpose, the one that I work with is the story of Bridget and the crone. Most of you have probably heard the name Bridget. She is a very well-known goddess, deity, whatever you prefer to call her. So the story goes basically, and again, there's a whole story to this. I can't tell the whole story. I'm going to give you the nutshell version of it, right? The Cliff Notes version of Bridget was a beautiful maiden, and the crone, who was an older woman, they also called her the hag, right? That's something that she may have been called. But the older woman in her years, right? So the crone was very jealous of Bridget's beauty. And so during this time, fall time, the story goes that the crone kidnapped Bridget and hid her away under a mountain, and that Bridget was trapped there for many months, and then finally she escaped, and that would be the spring equinox when she escaped, and she returned and brought back beauty. So that's where we see the flowers blossom and the trees growing back and all of that. That's a very short nutshell story, right? There's like a whole story that goes with that. But there's also a story which I think came later on, more towards Christianity, where when Bridget was captured by the crone, she was engaged to a knight, and the knight spent months and months and months looking for her, and then he rescued her and brought her back. We don't need a knight to rescue us. But anyhow, that's my thought on it, is that part of the story was maybe added in more towards, Christianity time, when they were trying to women. So Again, there's a very beautiful whole story that goes along with it. I would like to share it with you, but I just don't have the time for it today. So, but the symbolism of it is that the crone, so she's known as the ruler of winter, like the dying stage, right? When we're older, the stages of death, kind of morbid, but because I consider myself a crone in my crone years. Um, but anyway, the crone is the ruler of winter, and Bridget is the ruler of the spring and the summer and of the beauty. So she's like the maiden, and then the crone. So the maiden is brought underground by the crone. And so that's when our dormant, right? Our animals hibernate dormant, and then in the spring and came back. Bridget and the crone at this time. That's the way I like to thank Bridget for the beauty and the abundance in us, and then to move into the crone of honoring her and thanking her for this time of rest and restoring and regrouping and getting ready again for next spring, right? So if we follow the cycles of the seasons and we follow the natural cycle of how the order of things is supposed to be, again, I'm getting off here. We are going to find that our life is going to become more, I don't necessarily know if I want to say more fulfilled, but more satisfying. Um, if we move with the seasons and we follow the seasons and we take the time in the wintertime to go inward and rest and relax and recuperate and take care of ourselves and make sure that when next spring comes, we're good and ready and healthy to move into whatever we need to for that season. So, anywho, there's that. Some of the other things that, depending on, so Bridget and the Crone are the ones that resonate with me. They are typically the more Celtic version of the story. And again, Celtic is kind of a very loose term. It covers, when I say Celtic, and maybe this isn't what Celtic means to you, but for me personally, Celtic means Irish and Scottish and the parts of England that were part of the Celtic lands before the English took over. So before Great Britain conquered that land and took it over as their own. So Celtic for them would have been, like I said, it would have been Ireland, Scotland, and the parts of what are now England that used to be part of the Celtics land, the Celtic land. So that all resonates with me. That's where my ancestry is from. That's the ancestry that I resonate with, and the gods and goddesses that I resonate with. But on the other hand, I do want to cover a few other little things. Just to give you guys a little bit of variety, to give you guys that maybe something else will resonate with you, that, you know, because we can all have different things that we resonate with, and that's perfectly fine. But I also want to kind of share the similarities of how the stories go. So the other story that I really wanted to share was the story of Persephone. And so this is on the Greek kind of mythology side of things. So Persephone is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter. So she, how to say it? So let me back up just a tad here. We all know who Hades is, right? Hades is the ruler of the underworld. And so Hades is the brother of Zeus. And when Hades was sent to the underworld by Zeus, Zeus also promised him that that Hades could marry one of Zeus's daughters. That's kind of not necessarily a well-known fact. I use the word fact as, part of the story. Okay, we'll say that instead. So, anyways, Hades falls deeply in love with Persephone, who is a young, beautiful maiden, who, like, life revolves around her. She's beautiful. You think of like the birds chirping, the flowers all around her. Very, very similar to Bridget, right? So Hades goes to Zeus and says he wants to take Persephone as his bride. Now, Zeus is willing to honor what he told Hades, that Hades could take one of his daughters as his bride. But Zeus also knows that Demeter, Persephone's mother, is not going to be on board with this. So Zeus and Hades kind of come up with a plan of that 6 months out of the year, again, and they didn't say 6 months because they didn't have calendars, blah, blah, blah. For half of the year, Persephone would live with Hades in the underworld, and the other half of the year, Persephone would live above with us, and be with her mother. So again, you can see that similarities there, right? So Persephone, who is this young, beautiful maiden, is sent underground to the underworld during the fall equinox, where it's dark and cold and death, right? And then she lives with Hades in the underworld for the winter. And then in the spring, she comes back to live with her mother. So again, she comes back as the beautiful maiden. So she's bringing back the flowers and the trees and the rebirth. So we can definitely see where that similarity is to the story of Bridget and the crone. So some of the other things, again, I can't go into, like, the story of Persephone. There's a whole, like, the story is told beautifully, and there's a whole story that goes with it. And if you want the story, just Google it, right? And it'll come up for you and you can read more about it. And so this is where, I'm giving you this little bit of a nutshell. And then if it's something that is interesting to you or something that resonates with you, you can certainly ask me and I can help you. But like I said, this is pretty well-known stuff. You can Google it and do your own research and go down your own rabbit hole. The other one that you may also hear, it's not, for me, it's not as big of a, it's not something that I really celebrate or honor or work with, I guess is a better word, words. But it's a story that I also wanted to just kind of share with you. So again, you could see some of the similarities. And I think this story also came in a little bit later towards the rise of Christianity. But it's the story of the Holly King and the Oak King. So you can see where these are two male aspects of it, moving away from the women, right? The young maiden, the crone, moving away from that. But so the Holly King and the Oak King. And again, there's a big whole story that goes along with it. It's a beautiful story, but the nutshell of it is there are two kings that are trying to rule the world, the planet. So the Oak King, who is very strong, right? Oak trees are very strong and sturdy, is ruling the planet. He's in charge. And as the time goes by, he gets tired, he gets weaker, and so the Holly King challenges him to a duel, and the Holly King wins, and the Oak King, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, he gives up. That's not the word. There's a word for it. It's not in my brain right now. Surrenders. The Oak King surrenders, and he gives control over to the Holly King. And so now the Holly King has control. He is ruling over everything. And the Oak King takes several months to rest and get his strength back and become very strong again. And then in the springtime, he challenges the Oak King and he wins and he takes power back over. Cycle, 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 right? So that's the story of the Holly King and the Oak King. And again, you can Google that and get, read more about them if that's something that resonates with you. So there's a couple others that I really want to mention really quick. But I'm not going to get into any stories for them, but they are ones that may be honored at this time. If something of this sounds interesting to you, you can, again, certainly comment to me and I can help you, or you can just Google and do some research yourself. But some of the other ones is the horned god or the green man. So those are also very well known for summertime gods. And so again, they would be relinquishing control and returning to the earth. And then they would come back in the spring. So the horned god and the green man. Most of you may not really know what the green man is, but you've all seen that the face of the green man with all the leaves. I have one that hangs up over my door here in the shop. You've most likely seen that. So if that's something you're interested in, you can certainly do some research on that. But they would have been, again, how the story basically goes is they would relinquish control of the forest. They would be returning to the earth and resting and recuperating and all of that, and then coming back in the spring. So if you wanted to work with those, that's more of the masculine energy than the feminine energy. But if that's something that you resonate towards, that just feels right to you, certainly, like I said, follow your own intuition where that wants to take you. A couple other ones I want to talk about really quickly. The other ones, you might be wanting to work right now with with Hecate. She is a Greek goddess, and she's known as a triple goddess. So she has 3 faces. And I'm not going to get into all of that because, again, that's a whole rabbit hole I could go down. But she was associated with the moon. So the cycles of the moon would have been important during that time. She was also associated with crossroads or entryways. And again, this time of year is very heavily towards moving underground, under the other world, the underworld, death, all of that. So you can kind of see how that would kind of go there. She was also known as the goddess of night and light. And like I said, today is the day where our night and daytime are equal time. So Hecate, you can again see how that might be working into that for you if she's someone you want to work with. The next one I want to talk about really quick is Lilith. And Lilith didn't come along until a little bit later on. She came more during the Judaism, Hebrew kind of time. And I'm going to say I'm sorry right now because I don't know much about that. So there's not much help I can give you there. But if you ask me a question, I'll certainly go down the rabbit hole with you of doing some research if you want me to. But it's not one of the things I've studied, and I don't know a lot about it. But one that I has come up a lot in my teachings, people that I have learned from. She comes up a lot. A lot of people seem to resonate with her for some reason. There's a whole story again behind Lilith, and I'm not going to go into that whole story, but the story basically is that everybody knows about Adam and Eve, but the story in the Hebrew is that Lilith was Adam's first wife, and that she was cast out because she wouldn't submit to Adam. She wouldn't become that word. submissive, subservient. I can't say it. You guys know what I'm trying to say, though. She wouldn't be controlled by Adam, so she was cast out. And so from there, she kind of became, and again, this is where that whole, and I don't want to go there, but the whole religion thing of cutting women down, cutting women off from their power, right? So in the story, Lilith basically became a demon. And so, yeah, so she went to the underworld, became a demon. And again, I don't know the whole part of the story for that. And I apologize, but it's just not something that I've done a lot of studying with. But you can kind of see how some people might resonate with Lilith during this time of the year. Really quick is the Morgan. The Morgan is someone that I often resonate with. Excuse me. She's also known as a three-faced goddess, a triple goddess. She goes by, her name is always the Morgan, but over time, the word Morgan, the name Morgan, has been spelled in a bazillion different ways. I really don't think it's all that important how you spell it. I don't think she cares either how you spell it. However, I'm just saying you may have seen that spelled a lot of different ways, and I don't think it's all that important how you spell it. But she was a Celtic goddess, is a Celtic goddess, and she was known for many, many, many things. And again, that could be a whole nother video on its own. But she was known for being very brave. She was also known, though, as being a guardian of the people of the land. She was very protective of the earth and the cycles of the earth and the seasons of the earth and like the whole thing. So you can kind of see where people might want to honor her during this time as well. So if anybody has any questions about any of those, Bridget, the crone, Persephone, again, that's not one I know a ton about, but it has come across the different classes that I have taken. Persephone has come up many times. Or Hecate, Lilith, or Morgan, the Horn God, the Green Man, the Holly King, the Oak King. If you got more questions, certainly put them in the comments or private message me. That's fine too. I don't really care, however you feel best. But in the comments, your question may spark other people's questions as well. So, or they may have the same question, and then it'll be answered there for them. But and if you guys are interested in maybe a video series about gods and goddesses and deities, there's something that I've always been very interested in. So if that's something you guys want to know more about, let me know that as well, because maybe that is something that we can work in there somehow. All right, moving over to some of the things that you can do today, over the next couple of days, basically during fall, right? So if you can't get it done today, it's perfectly fine. But so some of the things you can do. Let's start with crystals first, okay? Because that won't take that long. Some of the crystals that you might want to work with during this time. The first one is citrine, and it says bring in the light, but in this aspect, it's more about envisioning and pursuing. So kind of that just being prepared, I guess, part. It's not really the best way to describe it, but when I was like talking about resting and recuperating and planning for the spring, so kind of all of that. Citrus is also really known for manifesting. So again, calling in what we are going to want to be calling in for our future. So you could work with some citrine that way as well. The next one I picked is some red jasper. And the card says take action. More like I said, they're going to be they would have been taking action right now because they would have been doing all kinds of preparing to get ready for winter. So, taking action that way. Maybe this is the time where just for us here, we're going to start to think about maybe getting the camper covered up. We're going to start thinking about maybe putting our lawn furniture away, that kind of stuff. But they would have been doing very different stuff. But preparing for winter. So you can use that to take some action for preparing for winter. But it's also really good for grounding. So we're going to kind of be returning to the earth, grounding, connecting with the earth. And it's also really good for patience and persistence. And so that can be that patience of that time where, again, we're going to go inward and we're going to kind of rest and we're going to relax. So we're going to have some patience. But at the same time, we're going to, persevere for what's coming in the future. So, all right, the last one I picked is some quartz. And this just says get crystal clear. Quartz, I could do a whole video on just quartz. Quartz is really good for bringing clarity. So it's good for clearing out, what we don't want. Again, getting crystal clear, clearing out what we don't want. But it's also really good for pulling in clarity and optimism. And it's also what I call an amplifier. I don't know if that's really the right term for it, but it's like a booster. So if you work with it with these two, it's basically gonna like give these guys that extra boost. It's gonna amplify their purpose and what you're working with them for. So there's some quartz you can work with. There's some stones you can work with. All right, so that is done. The other thing that colors, I usually cover colors that you can work with, and they're going to be the pretty typical colors that you would think of during fall, during Thanksgiving. They're going to be oranges and yellows and reds and browns, right? The typical colors of fall. So most of us, are going to decorate our house in those colors. It's reflected in nature. The leaves are turning those colors. Our plants are kind of dying and turning brown. So it's kind of reflected everywhere, but you could bring some of that color inside as well. Some big symbols that you could use during this time as well is apples and acorns. And again, there's a whole story I could go into about why apples. There is a whole background story to why it's apples. But again, I can't really go into all that right now because it's just, it would be way too long. But so apples are a good thing. And most of us are, this is a time where people are going apple picking, which kind of leads into some of the other things that I was going to talk about. But, it's natural stuff that we do at this time of the year anyway. So, and I am going to talk a little bit here too. But so we've talked about our crystals. We've talked about our colors. We've talked about some of the bigger symbols, which is, like I said, the apples and the acorns. Those are more, like I said, the bigger symbols of this time. Some of the other things that you could be working with is, and again, this kind of leads into some of the things that you could do. So you could go on a nature walk, and that would help getting that grounding that I was talking about, that connecting to earth. But it would be really good to go for a walk and collect different kinds of leaves. So, maple leaves, oak leaves, leaves from the apple trees, and pine cones, acorns, anything like that, depending on where you live, is going to depend on what you find out in nature. But all of those things would be really great if you take a little basket or a bucket or whatever you want to take, and go on a walk, connect with Mother Nature, connect with the earth, and gather some of these things, because those are going to be your decorations. Those are the best decorations to bring inside. Um, you can use all of those things on your altar space. You can just use them in your home. A very big popular thing, which again leads me into things you could do, is making a wreath. So if you have like a grapevine wreath, and you can use all of those things to decorate it and hang it on your door. Um, Before I get too much more into talking about some different things you can do, I want to just go back a little bit and talk about, and again, this is something that you can do, is you can work with, obviously, I usually talk about herbs and oils, and I talk about these interchangeable. So if you have some of the herbs and some of the oils, that's fine. If you only have some herbs or you only have some oils, you only have one of these things, whatever you have to work with is perfectly fine. If you want to go out and buy a bunch of stuff, that is completely up to you, but it's not necessarily what you have to do. I'm not telling you to go out and spend a ton of money on buying stuff. That's why, like I said, just go out in nature and collect things. Yes, you can go to the dollar store and buy fake leaves and fake pine cones and fake acorns and fake apples and all that stuff. And I have some of those things in my house, but you don't need to. Like, you can go out and get them. The apples, because as I leave them out on my space all year long, and I obviously can't leave an actual apple sitting on my space all year long. So yeah, I have some fake apples and things like that. But the pine cones I can leave out all year long, and but the leaves I can't. So again, just depending on what you want to work with and how you want to work with it and when you want to work with it and so forth. But anyway, herbs slash oils to make yourself an incense. Or again, leading into another one of the things I was going to talk about is the simmer pots. You guys have probably heard me talk about simmer pots before. I am a big advocate for simmer pots. I love mine. It's on the stove now. It's obviously not turned on because I'm not in the house, but simmer pots are very important at this time of year for me. And so some of the things that you can work with, your basics are, you could just work with some cinnamon sticks, and you could work with some clove, and you can actually, sorry, my nose is all itchy. You could work with some pine. So you can go right out and clip some pine. Side note again, I always recommend, if you're not going to be picking things up off the ground, if you're going to actually be taking clippings, that you honor the plant. You ask the plant if it's okay to take a clipping and leave some sort of offering. And I'll talk about that again in a minute too. So, but if you're going to go take an actual clipping of a pine tree, I suggest, just communicating with that tree and making sure that's okay. But I really, really do try to pick my stuff up off the ground. If there's a tree limb that's down, I will get those before I take it off the actual tree. My cedar tree out front, I do clip that, and I commune with the tree and let her know that I'm actually doing that for her own good, because again, squirrel, she's in a spot where the snow falls off the roof and a lot of times falls on the backside of the tree and breaks the branches. So instead of that happening, I'll clip the branches back a little bit and use that in my incense or whatever I'm making. So it's benefiting me, but it's also benefiting the tree. So by cutting the tree back a little bit is actually saving it from having branches like broken off. So anywho, try not to use, the trees if you don't need to. So anyhow, so cinnamon, clove, and pine, they're all really great for cleansing. They're all really great for bringing in wisdom and luck. They're also really good for protection. So you can make, like I said, you can make an incense. You can make a simmer pot. You can, if you have the essential oils, you can make a perfume, an anointing oil. You can put it in your, if you have a diffuser, a Scentsy burner, whatever, you've got, go ahead and work with that. I had some beeswax that I melted down and I put essential oils in them. And I had those little silicone molds that were the shapes of little pumpkins. And I put it in there. And so now it came out and I've got these little pumpkin that I've been putting in my Scentsy burners, whatever burner you have. If it came from Walmart, that's fine too. But you can make them yourself and they're much more healthy for you than some of the other things that you buy at the store. So mine are just beeswax and essential oils, and they melt really great and they smell really great. And when you turn it off, it hardens back up. So anyway, that's something you can do as well if you want. You can make yourself your own little, I just call them melts. I don't know. Somebody got a better, clever name, let me know, but that's what I just call them. I just call them melts. So you can make your simmer pot. You can go for a walk in the woods. You can make your own melts. Like I said, anointing oils, perfume. You could put all of those things in a bathtub. I'm not sure how that would be. The pine might be a little, but you could do it if you wanted. Just be aware that there might be some cleanup for the bathtub after. You might smell kind of like, I don't know, a Christmas turkey. Anyway, yeah. So some of the things that you can do at this time, we talked about symbols, we talked about colors, we talked about crystals, we've talked about herbs and oils. All right, so the next thing I have is some of the activities that you can do during this time. I'm going to try to wrap it up. I know I'm already in over an hour. So just to recap, like I said, go for a walk in nature, gather up your leaves, whatever they may look like, cedar, apple, aspen, maple, oak, pine, walnut, whatever they look like, pine cones, acorns, walnuts, whatever you find out in nature. Me personally, I tend to like things a little more, I don't know if you want to say morbid, but on the dark side. I decorate with, if I found an animal skull or an antler or something like that, I would definitely incorporate that into my decorations. If that's not you, that's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. We all have our things. I associate mine with, again, knowing your natal chart. My Venus, my Mars, and my Mercury are all in Scorpio. So you can go apple picking, and then obviously you can, from there, you could go a bazillion different ways. Apple crisp, apple cakes, apple turnover, apple sauce, apple cider, all of those things. So all of those would be really great, which again, I think are a lot of things that people just naturally do during this time anyway. They just maybe don't understand the symbolism of it. So another thing would be is doing a pot roast or a stew at this time would be really great. Things to incorporate would be sweet potatoes, carrots, squash, onions, corn, and then obviously some sort of meat if you want meat in it. If you don't, then that's perfectly fine as well. So some sort of stew or pot roast would be really great at this time. And again, I think most of us are naturally doing that anyway. Moving over to the last little bit of stuff I have here, drying herbs. So again, this is part of the whole harvesting, right? We're going to be harvesting whatever we have in our gardens right now. If you've got a vegetable garden, you're going to be getting what's left. For me, it's more about my herbs. My garden didn't do crap this year, so I don't even want to talk about that. But I'm drying a lot of herbs. Yesterday, I was out picking lemon thyme. I was out picking oregano, rosemary, basil, peppermint, and yeah, it's all in my house drying. So something else is preserving. So this would be a really good time, again, especially if you are harvesting things, jams, pickles, canning your vegetables, things like that sort of stuff. We've already kind of touched base on apple cider, so it'd be a really good time to warm up a nice glass of apple cider and enjoy that. So again, just kind of reflecting, preparing, feasting, drinking, relaxing, and resting, right? So go ahead and go for your walk out in nature, collect all of your stuff, bring it back, decorate your wreath, decorate your altar, go pick things out of your garden, make your pot stew, yep, your pot roast or your stew. Collect the things out of your garden and make your jams and your pickles and can your vegetables. Pick your apples, make your apple cider, all of the desserts that I talked about. And then we're going to feast and we're going to drink and then we're going to relax and we're going to rest. Okay. So, last thing here is, just to touch base with the equinox. Again, is a perfect time of clearing out, so physically and spiritually. So this would be a really good time. A lot of us we associate, spring cleaning. Everybody's like, I got to do my spring cleaning. I got to do my spring cleaning. It's also just as important to do your fall, your autumn cleaning, and clean out. And again, this is a really good time for physically and spiritually. So physically, this would be a really good time to, your summer clothes that you didn't really wear, send them off to the thrift store. Get your winter clothes out. Go through them. What you're not going to wear, what doesn't fit you anymore, whether it be too big or too large or too small. Go ahead and get that off to thrift stores, communities, places that somebody could be using that for you. I also, when I was putting out all of my Mabon decorations, like there was a whole bunch that I didn't put out. So that was given away. I made a pile and gave it away. Kind of just clearing out and making space and preparing. So it is physically and spiritually important to do that. The spiritual part, again, going to just touch base back really quick on that shadow work. Yes, this is a very important time to do shadow work, exploring your dark side, integrating it in personal growth. But I also believe that shadow work should be done all year long. Okay. The last little thing that I wanted to touch base on really quick was the offerings that I mentioned. When you go out and harvest anything, obviously if you're harvesting your garden, you're going to take everything, right? Because you're going to eat that. It's going to be food. Okay. So you take all of it. But if you're out in nature and you're harvesting anything wild, it's important to not take everything, even if it's berries, because those berries are going to feed other things, birds, animals, bears, all kinds of stuff. Those berries are important, right? So as a rule of thumb, take about a third of what's there. That's kind of the standard practice, I guess, is to take about a third, or take what you need. If you're going to go home and make a blueberry cake and you only need a cup of blueberries, then just take a cup of blueberries. Like, don't fill a bucket and then let them go bad and throw them out. So take what you need, but don't take more than a third. So that's kind of the rule of thumb. Offerings. If you are taking something, remember to leave something. That doesn't mean you're garbage. I shouldn't have to say that, but make an offering. Really great offerings could be as simple as leaving a pine cone. Yes, you probably picked up the pine cone somewhere in the forest, but when you're picking your berries or harvesting some pine needles or whatever it is that you are gathering, berries or whatever, leave an offering. Pine cone is fine. A bundle of flowers, even if they're, again, flowers that you've picked on your walk, and you leave the bundle of flowers in the offering. It's the offering part that's really, to me, the important part, that you're acknowledging that you're taking something that's going to benefit you and you want to be leaving something. So that offering is the important part, not what the actual offering is. But we want it to be biodegradable, right? We don't want to be putting plastic and things like that out there. So again, it could be acorns, it could be leaves, it could be a bundle of flowers that you picked up along the way. Some other really great ones are you could take a little jar of maple syrup or honey and pour it onto the ground and make that up as your offering. Anything like that. You can leave food. That's pretty common as well, for leaving some sort of food out, like a small biscuit or muffin or something like that. If it's made, please don't leave, like, don't buy a Little Debbie and leave it in the woods. It is food, it is biodegradable, but I try to make sure that it's more of a natural thing. So anyway, and that offering can be left for the plant itself that you're harvesting from. It can be left to the Fae. That's a common one as well. People leaving offerings to the Fae, who are known to kind of be guardians of the forest. And again, talking about the Fae, that can go into a whole bazillion videos. For me personally, it's a little bit more general. I'm leaving the offering for Mother Nature, for the earth, as a collective. So if I might be harvesting from 2 or 3 different plants, I don't necessarily make an offering for each one of those plants. I make an offering to the earth. I'm taking from the earth, I'm returning to the earth, and it's to Mother Nature, to Gaia. So I think that's going to wrap it up. So that's a good place to end with that. We're going to leave a nice offering to Mother Nature. So, all right. So again, if you have any questions, any comments, anything that you might do during this time that I didn't cover and maybe you'd like to share, please do that. I would love to get this to be a little bit more interactive, but it's hopefully you're getting something useful out of this video. Yeah, I guess that's it. So happy Mabon. Mabon blessings to you. I hope you do something that's on my suggested list. I would love to see anything that you do, even if it's a picture of your stew that you made, your altar space, your wreath, a picture of a cup of apple cider, whatever it may be. I would really love to see that. If you don't want to share it here, you can certainly go over to my Facebook group page, which is Lady Faltai's Light Healers. Certainly share in there. And hopefully by sharing, you will maybe give some motivation to follow suit and do some of these things and share as well. So yeah. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. And remember to be kind. Your kindness is not only going to improve your day, it's going to improve somebody else's day. And it could potentially change someone's life for the better. So it could be yours. So, and it doesn't cost us anything. So thanks for watching, guys. Love you. Bye.